Hello everyone, a warm welcome again. I'm a bit hungover today, guys, so please be nice to me. We're going to talk a little bit about early Christianity and the Gnostic influences that were right there from the beginning. I'm going to quote from a couple of church fathers. We're going to show you, just give you a little lay of the land of how prominent Gnostic sects were in the first 2 centuries, really. And we're going to learn something today. Hopefully understand that what we have with the Orthodox faith really comes to us today because they won the day. They won the ideological battle, the theological battle. But at the time, through other people's works, we can see just how important and prominent Gnostic Christians such as Marcion were in the beginnings and the fabrication of what was in the beginnings of what was Christianity. Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to start by reading something by D.R. Murdoch, The Christ Conspiracy. Okay, here we go. By the time he arrived at Rome, this is Marcion, around 142-3 AD, Marcion had already successfully founded several churches. So effective was Marcion that by Epiphanius' time, Marcionites constituted a vast number of men who could be found in numerous places, including not only in Rome and Italy, but in Egypt, Palestine, Arabia, Syria, Cyprus, and the Thebaid, and even in Persia. Thebaid, even in Persia. Justin's time in Rome was likely eclipsed by other. This is me again. Eclipsed by many other Gnostics who apparently far more popular, having sped throughout the empire and into Asia Minor. 110 CE saw Carpocrates founding Gnostic church in Alexandria. Basilides founded another school in 117, again in Alexandria, the center of the Gnostic world. And remember, Gnostic just was Christianity back in this time. The word Gnostic really came in way later, and even into the 19th century, people began to talk about Gnostics again. But these guys were just Christians in their time. So again, in the center of the Gnostic. Well, around 120 CE, Corinthius appeared as a stellar Gnostic theologian, writing in the city of Ephesus. Valentinus studied in Alexandria, then sojourned to Rome in 136 CE to set up his school there, was very highly regarded, and was for a time a candidate for Rome's bishop. This comes to us from De Prescription Hereticorum, chapter 30. I think that's from Irenaeus. In 144 CE, Marcion, who already had thousands of followers in various places, also came to Rome, followed by Marcus in 150. Marcion offered some 200,000 Cistercians, this is from against Marcion 4:4, to the Church of Rome, roughly $7 to $8 million by today's standards, which was initially accepted, though later given back, presumably after more Hebrew-friendly members of the church realized he was trying to innovate away from aspects of Old Testament doctrine. We should recall, though, that this is somewhat in line with Paul's original teachings, as he himself had significant doctrinal arguments with the more Torah orthodox Peter, just as the New Testament Jesus did. It's quite interesting. I suppose what we're seeing here is previously to 144, when Marcion offered his gospel to the written record, you see other Christians, and quite a few of them setting up churches in earlier times. In the earliest times, if we remember that the first pagan reception of Christianity and Christians is Pliny the Younger. So this is early on, guys. Several of Marcion's, this is Jason Badou now, several of Marcion's critics make no mention of any change that he tampered with texts charge that he tampered with texts. These include both close contemporaries such as Justin Martyr or Radon, as well as writers of subsequent generations such as Clement of Alexandria and Hippolytus. For them, the problem was his erroneous interpretation of Christian teachings. So this is Jason Badun, The Myth of Marcion as Redactor, the evidence of Marcion's gospel against an assumed Marcion redaction, page 4. That's a very good kind of long form essay on the subject, but well worth reading. Great scholarship. If differing interpretations seem to have been a problem, and no early references help to support a hypothesis that he excised any texts he didn't like, should we really believe the early Orthodox commentators? Are we just to take them at their word? We read on. This is from the same essay. We do not have any clear statement from Marcion in the surviving quotes from the Antitheses, his pre-book to the Gospel, that he expurgated anything from his biblical text, and neither do we find in those biblical texts any consistent pattern of excising Jewish elements. And this is quite interesting here. Where we would hope to find, I'm just going to read you one example of this from David Litwa, and he goes through and shows us where we would expect to find Marcion kind of cutting and clipping and getting rid of certain of the Old Testament narrative. He doesn't do that, and this is where Irenaeus says no, he's definitely doing this. He's eviscerating all of these elements that he doesn't like, and bastardizing our Gospel of Luke. Well, it actually turns out he's not really doing that at all. I think he had far more of a respect for the Old Testament, even though some Christians say that the Old Testament God, or Marcion, believed the Old Testament God, as Irenaeus does in Tertullian, that he believed that God not to be the true God. But here he is with his Luke, not excising pieces of text that you would expressly think he would. The Church Fathers were right about one thing. This is David Litwa. Marcion believed that Christians should separate themselves from Jewish rites and texts, but this truth demolishes the theory of Marcion, the interventionist editor. If Marcion was such an editor, he would presumably have removed any connection or continuity between Jesus and the Jewish tradition, but this is not the case. There simply is no consistent pattern of excising Jewish elements anywhere in Marcion's gospel. In his gospel, a woman is entitled to healing as a daughter of Abraham. 13:6 in Marcion's gospel. The beggar Lazarus lies in Abraham's bosom, 16:22, and Jesus instructs Jewish people to obey the law's precepts, and he goes in lots of passages here. Jesus himself is eager to eat the Jewish Passover. Marcion's gospel cites or refers to Hebrew Bible passages multiple times. In fact, his gospel contains about 3/4 of the Old Testament references found in canonical Luke. Elisha and John the Baptist are affirmed as exemplary prophetic figures in continuity with Jesus. The Baptist is portrayed as Jesus' prophesied forerunner. Okay, so there's a few more quotes I have in the book relating more aspects of this. Interesting. These linkages here were between Marcion, who evidently did not like aspects of Torah law, but he's faithfully preserving that in his gospel. At this point, this last point is important. We'll go through it. It might be because he knew a claim. Sorry about this, guys. Building our thesis further now, we're going to move on to the philosopher and satirist Celsus, who leaves us interesting points germane to our study and about Christianity as a whole in these early times, as he mentions the existence of multiple Gnostic Christian sects, their differing traditions and their texts. Here are just 2 or 3 of the plethora of insights Celsus affords us. Celsus, Contra Celsum 2:4. It is impossible to count the number of interpretations they offer on the same text. They interpret passages differently from each other, each one believing that their interpretation alone is correct and in accord with the truth. Contra Celsum 2:27. They disagree so violently with one another and refute one another's teachings in such a way that they cannot even convince one another. Some of them maintain that Jesus was born in a particular manner, whilst others insist that he was never really born at all, but appeared only in semblance and vision, just like St. Paul appears to have done. And remember, Paul never really mentions anything about the gospel Jesus as a human. Contra Celsum 8:49, some say that there will be a bodily resurrection, others that it will be a spiritual, and still others claim that there is no resurrection at all, only a release of the soul. We will remember that exactly this Paul himself, as with much of the epistle material written by others, seems to convey this exact message. So this is canonical stuff, and this appears to convey that kind of message. These quotes go some way to showing how wildly these diverse sects fought with one another over belief. Celsus also appears to know little of any Orthodox Christianity we know today, and what he does know, he constantly derides as myth and fiction. Nor does he know much canonical material as far as his writings tell us, and this is important. His works obviously survive in Origen's Contra Celsum. That's basically all we know about this guy Celsus. Origen would have likely recourse to the infamous Testimonium Flavianum to prove Jesus' divinity, wisdom, and phenomenal abilities, to put Celsus in his place. But he does not. A highly probable sign that the Testimonium was a fake written after Origen's time, a fact we cover in another work. So if Origen was writing in the 3rd century, early 3rd century, and this is important, guys, so please, this is what I really wanted to convey. And by the year straddling, no, it isn't actually, but I think it's, no, I tell you what, I'm not gonna read that. I've just got one extra piece to go into here. Michael A. Williams, again, just a little more on Marcion and these early Christians. In addition to writing the Antithesis, Marcion was apparently the first Christian ever to set forth a New Testament, that is, a closed collection of Christian scriptures. Marcion's collection of scriptures contained no Old Testament because he rejected entirely the religious authority of the Jewish scriptures. They were the scriptures of a lesser God, an inferior religion. Marcion's New Testament, this Luke and Gospel, contained only 11 writings, the Gospel of Luke and 10 of the letters of Paul, excluding the pastorals. But Marcion also did some editing of Luke, and these Pauline letters convinced that they had been. So this guy's actually saying that there was some editing going on. I don't believe this. I think it's actually stronger. I'm probably going to have to remove that from the word. This was a quote I put in before I started to really work on this section of the book. But we see Tertullian again, he accusing the apostles of perverting the gospel of Christ. This would be false apostles like Marcion, and labouring to destroy the character of those gospels which are published as genuine under the name of apostles. When Marcion complains that apostles are suspect for their prevarication and emulation of having been depraved, having even depraved the gospel. Tertullian is obviously one of these heresiologists that is saying, no, these guys are eviscerating these gospels. Well, we don't see gospels, the canonical gospels, until decades after Marcion gave us his one gospel, the same one gospel Paul talks about. These 4 gospels are only attested, first of all, by properly and given names by Irenaeus, writing in about 180. I believe that he had an input in, or at least edited, as some scholars do, that he edited some of these texts. So yeah, I mean, to round up quickly, I'm sorry this has been a bit of a mishmash, but I don't believe in this notion now, as some scholars do, that Marcion really took apart and edited the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke before Marcion doesn't appear to have existed, and it's only with Marcion we get the first reception of a gospel. It's unfortunate that this reception of his gospel was by heresiologists, but they did pretty diligently quote Marcion's gospel. That's allowed us to be able to piece that gospel together to a large extent now, and we're seeing stuff like, as I said, much of the Old Testament material in this Luke being maintained. It's still there. So what we see is Marcion, lots of these other early Gnostics, early 2nd century Gnostics, and I mean early 2nd century, were already establishing churches, and they had often very different ideas about Christianity than the gospel traditions had. Could it be that the Gnostics, as I fervently believe now, were the original Christians, that they were taking Old Testament notions and ideas of Christ, the celestial Saviour, and just making him into a human, like so many mythologies before? I believe that's probably the truth. Ciao for now. Been nice. It's a lovely day out there in South London. Alright, take it easy guys. Nice one. See you later. Bye.